companion to the lesson this morning is on an encouragement. And just as I think Paul has given us a template by which we should be strengthened by encouraging and to give gratitude, this is a part of also on that. The definition for encouragement very simply is putting courage back into a person. That means that we get down and we are struggling. The simplest thing I can give you is the more we tell people to fix it, the more we tell people what to do to fix it, we actually shut the brain down. So we're going to do a little neuroscience today to understand a little more about that and what we could do maybe to help out what's going on. If you feel down, if you feel discouraged, you're not alone. In fact, Elijah felt discouraged. We see that in 1 Kings. So we can as well, but we don't want to stay there very long. The real strength we have in the church is the brothers and sisters coming together, finding those individuals you can come and share together, because that's when the brain starts working. We call it the prefrontal cortex. So you asked me, so where does it say in the Bible we're supposed to encourage people? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. So 1 Thessalonians 5:11, therefore what? Encourage one another and build up one another, just as you are doing. Encourage means to bring the courage back to the individual that's struggling. I want to go a little bit better into that, or a little deeper in Maclaren's, and look at it from the standpoint here of the Greek. This term building up is an interesting term. It is as though we have a foundation of a building that we need to make sure it's going to be solid and stand on it. As children, we have that song, remember the one of building the house built on the sand, the house built on the rock, that we have, and we understand that from a very young age, that something about that structure is very important because it can wash away or it can stand firm. This is what Paul is using, and he uses that metaphor quite often in his scriptures. So that building up is a great duty, because that's important for Paul to put that and use that metaphor quite a few times. It's important for us to build up our brothers and sisters in church. Now, there are three areas that Maclaren goes into very simply, is that self-edification, that is building ourselves up by looking at what's going on and seeking help when we need that. United edification is the church coming together as a unit. So when somebody's down, we seek them out, we help them out to find a way through, again, to get that courage. Our divine edification is going to God and having God help us get through that. So let's look at how the brain works and how encouragement works within the brain. And again, I'm not going to go into really deep neuroscience, but I need to get there a little bit to understand, or have you understand what's going on. Emotions, the negative emotions we have, shut down the prefrontal cortex. The more they are in your life, the harder it is for you to determine what's going on and how to find a way out. The only way to do that is to infuse positive emotions back into the brain. Then the prefrontal cortex starts to work. I know I'm getting a little technical, but I got to get there. So what happens when we have these negative emotions coming in? Our concentration goes down. Our cognitive abilities of looking and getting new information, understanding information, and putting that into a way to resolve the issue is limited, or it's diminished significantly. What we can do and what we see in science is that once we infuse positive emotions into the brain, giving that to the individual and allowing the individual to find that internally, the brain starts to work again. We can see that firing through colors when we do the studies. The darker red, the more the color, the more the activity. So when we have those negative struggles, when we're down, we're discouraged, the negativity overwhelms us, the brain can't think. It's very hard for us to get into the capacity we had before, the learning we've had before, the experience we had before, and find a way out. We've got to infuse the positive in there. It means we've got to find somebody that can help us get to that point, or help from somewhere else. So that prefrontal cortex we call the executive center. I'll show you a picture of just a second what's going on. That is where the key piece is. When that prefrontal cortex is blocked by the negativity, it bounces down. I told you about that knee-jerk part of the brain called the amygdala today. We'll go into that in just a little bit. We have a phrase that was in country music, 10, 20 years ago, called "get her done." Means that to get a point, just do it. That's the amygdala. It doesn't look at social norms. It doesn't look at your cognitive abilities. It doesn't look at the past histories. It just makes the decision. So we get through and go, why did I ever say that? That's because the amygdala is taken over, not the prefrontal cortex. The negativity of the brain stops the prefrontal cortex from working. So when we get in that situation, we can't think clearly because we can't find the way out. Something doesn't seem logical. We can't coordinate with others. Why? Because that social norm that's in there is missing. So when you come and you try to help me, I have trouble because I can't figure out what's going on. It doesn't seem right. When we do get new information, it's hard for us to decipher it because the cognitive capacity that's in the prefrontal cortex is not functioning. And then you want to try to find new ideas to resolve it. Good luck. Because at this point, everything shuts down. Not only in the function of new things in resolution, but the existing pathways, the normal things you do also are diminished. That's why it's harder for us to do the simple things, because the negativity is pulling everything down. You don't think encouragement is needed? Man, we need encouragement, especially in those situations. So here's a picture of the prefrontal cortex. Again, you have two halves of the brain. When I was taught neuroscience and neurophysiology, we talked about parts of the brain. Now we got down to an axon. An axon is 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters. So brain science has really expanded since I was here working in that area. Here's the amygdala. So let's look at it and see the little blue color on your left-hand side. That's the prefrontal cortex. The magenta one at the bottom is the amygdala, and then the hippocampus is off on the side. So if that prefrontal cortex blocks, it sends it down to the amygdala, and the amygdala does not do us any favors. It makes a decision that's extremely difficult for us to get through. So now you got a little idea of that brain, what's happening here and what's going on at that point. About not Wednesday, but Wednesday before last, I was really excited. I was at home and I was watching Charlie Autry, and he started talking about emotional intelligence. And I'm going, wow, this is in my area. Emotional intelligence this is the gentleman that designed that. Let me explain something about the term intelligence. We normally get associated with an IQ. That's not the case. It just means the ability to understand it. Now in this, emotional intelligence, this means, do we understand the emotions that are happening in our lives? And can we find a more appropriate way and appropriate time to infuse them? In other words, resolving issues. That's emotional intelligence. We use that quite a bit in positive psychology and also with work. So here's a definition from our statement. Heightened prefrontal activity is associated with positive emotions. Negative emotions stop that. Enhancing mental capabilities such as creative thinking, cognitive flexibility, and the processing of information. Negative stops it, positive makes it go through. So let's look at some corporate research. I won't spend a lot of time here, but I want to look at some areas that are in the sector that could help us see what's going on. So this is the first one. When positive feedback were given to individuals about something negative going to happen. In other words, we're going to have a downsizing in the corporation, but we're going to present it in a positive mode. What happened to the people there? Well, they rated the interaction as being positive because they felt they had some way out. Even though it's negative, they know that downsizing was going to happen. Because it was put in a positive form, guess what? The brain started to work. They started to look at some options out. Conversely, when good news was given to people with a negative slant, they left and they remembered the negative tone, not the potential for the positive. Those individuals left, went to other people and told them about the negativity. And next thing you know, we have now this negativity going through the whole corporation just because of the tone, allowing the brain to work or not to work. Here's a gentleman that has some research that I really enjoy, and that is looking at the brain and how the brain is functioning. When I made the statement just a few moments ago about fixing yourselves, have you ever been in a situation where you're just troubled and somebody comes up with some good advice and makes you more troubled? It doesn't get you out. It just gives you more information. You're overwhelmed anyway, and you get overwhelmed. Or have you ever been in a situation where someone gives you a compliment and you're feeling really down? What do we do with that compliment? We shred it. But it becomes also very difficult for us because now the question is, why don't I see that? Or what's wrong with that person to see me in that light that I'm not there? It's fascinating how the brain works with negative slants or positive slants, depending on where we're at the time. But he said categorically that when we are in a negative situation and people bring that negativity to us, meaning that you can fix it, this is what you need to do, it actually shuts the brain down even more than what it was before. It doesn't help us, it actually hinders us. This is the last one we'll deal with, and this is Losada. And this is looking at when do we have individuals that we can project are going to be really efficient in the corporate sector? What characteristics do they have? And this I think you might find interesting. Those corporate teams that had the best success had 2.9 times the positive references in their brain than the negative. The positive allowed them to see areas of what they needed and then how to fix it. But those individuals that are one-on-one, one positive, their own negative, didn't function very well, no matter what their skill set was, what their education was. By the way, in that study, and in the studies shows that the movement of people that are positive around will increase that also. So this is an author, and I love this rendition from her. If someone listens, that doesn't mean they have to listen intently. If you see somebody trying to listen to you and understand you, it's amazing what your brain does, because we don't get that very much anymore. Or stretches out a hand. This is a part of the encouragement to help an individual, that they see that you are doing that for them. Or whispers a kind word of encouragement. Not a lot, just something to break the monotony, just to bring you closer to have that prefrontal cortex work. Or attempt to understand. Just try to understand me. Just listen enough that you're getting an idea. And she ends it by saying, extraordinary things begin to happen. So let's look at it from the standpoint of the Bible. What do we see with encouragement? We'll spend the rest of the time going through the Bible and the structures there. There are 5 things we have, and the first one here is invigoration. Invigoration means the same thing we have as encouragement, because that brings the courage back in. It gives us the momentum to get through those sticking points that we have. Life is not easy. Those of us who spend any time in life can tell you life is definitely not easy. Because why? We get momentum going, we feel like we have something working, next thing you know, we get derailed. So now we have to build energy to get back in there. What is Newton's law? Remember? Newton's law of classical mechanism says that when the body is stopped, it takes a significant amount more of energy to get the body moving than it did when the body was moving already. So we stop altogether, and it's very hard for us to get started. So in that, trying to get started, what we end up is product that doesn't really give us a lot of advantage because we don't have the mental capability of finding out what to do. So what does encouragement do? Encouragement that we're talking about here, spiritual encouragement, opens up new ideas and new eyes for the individual to find ways out. Allow that other individual to move just to get some traction and move forward. So why is encouragement important, especially spiritually? I think it's a necessary aspect of walk of life. Let's look at what Paul says. Remember, we already talked about Paul, one part, saying that we're to encourage one another. So let's look at it again for Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews 3:13. But what? Encourage one another, what? Day after day. That's continuing. It's not just one time and then leaving. That is day after day, as long as it's still called today. We talked earlier today, and I said we have a lot of gratitude for things. We just don't express it. We need to express it to help other people out. The same thing here with encouragement. Don't let the day go by. If you see somebody in need, please reach out to them. Please give a hug. Please give an encouragement voice or something to help them out. As long as it's called today, so that none of you will be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. You know what's amazing about that is that look at what power we have. How would you define hardened by the deceitfulness of sin? To me, that's spiritual death. That means I have reached a point where I can't find a way back. Look at the front. When we encourage one another, we present an environment that eliminates that. Fascinating, the strength of encouragement by the Hebrew writer. The second we have is confidence. I will be presenting two lessons in about 3 weeks, and I want to work on this aspect of for the next two sermons on confidence. So if we look at confidence, we do the antithesis. The opposite of confidence is discouragement, which we said already. Elijah experienced, and many other men in the Bible experienced discouragement. The reality is that we talk to ourselves worse than anybody else. We're our worst critic. You can tell me bad things, and I can store them in my heart, and they bother me, but nothing is worse than what I say about myself. And when we get those points, we've got to find a way out, because our inner talk is very difficult for us and can be catastrophic. Helping somebody when they're having that, just being around them, don't have to have an answer. That's the thing. You don't have to have an answer. All you have to do is be there, and magic what it works through the individual. So having a brother or sister come to us and encourage us gives us the impetus, the power to go through, to not get stuck, to move on. Doesn't mean we make these giant steps or giant leaps. It's just getting movement, just feeling the freedom to breathe again. Many times I've had individuals in my office say, I just need to breathe. I need to feel I can breathe again, because everything is closing in on them. So let's look at it from the standpoint of the Hebrew writer again with his confidence. Hebrews 10, 24 through 25. And let us consider how we may spur one another. That's as close as we can get to encouragement again. Spurring one another toward love and good deeds. Not giving up meeting together, as some have a habit of doing, but encouraging one another two times in this, that all more you have, and all the more you see the day approaching. The day here is a relative point toward the day of Jesus coming. And we don't know what that is. If you do, let me know. But I'll be honest with you, no one knows that. Not even Jesus knows that. But in other words, don't let the day progress. Don't let the week progress. If you see somebody needs encouragement, do that. Help them as quickly as possible. So in the reality of this, one of the biblical authors that I was reading his treatise on it said it's good to know also that this is not a struggle of blood and skin. This is a battle that's outside of our purview or outside of our strength, and that is between Satan and God. Yet we're the pawns, because when Satan gets us moving toward him, obviously he is winning in that situation. But does he win at the end? No, he loses in the end. So if we were to put on that spiritual armor, which we talk about in Ephesians 6:10 through 18, we've got to have that encouragement within us to do so. Because if we leave the sword behind, we're in trouble. If we forget to put the helmet on, we're in trouble. Encouragement allows us to move that, to pull that on, to see that it's working for us, to use that in Ephesians 6:10 through 18. The third of these is guidance, because encouragement really gives guidance, because it's positive for us. It tells us we have a way out and shows a way out of the problems we get into. I'm sure you've heard this before, Aujou, but many of you might not have the name attached to it. Give a man a fish, feed him for a day. I'm sure that's familiar to you. Teach a man to fish and feed him for a lifetime. Tell a person what you believe is going to fix him will not allow him to get past that day. You've not fed him the rest of his life. You've given him a fish. Allowing that person to understand and get with him and support that individual in the movement, he will learn. So we use this in our psychology to understand how we are to work with individuals. Rather than telling somebody what to do, is allowing them to find that and then support them in the pathway. So John Thompson was talking in the class today, and he said, letting the person see and read the Bible instead of telling them what's going on is a key. Why? Because you get more emotions involved when we learn the more emotions we have engaged. So it's really, John, an excellent part of what we do with the positive psychology is getting a person to learn through that process. It's not just a pep talk. It's much more than that. It's going to the root of the issue with the person emotionally and then allowing that movement their movement and time to get through. I know I have been in these situations. It's very infrequent, and I appreciate that, but it's there. When you get so far down, you just don't know what to do. And I'll be honest with you, most of us don't know how to ask because we don't know what to do. And when you ask somebody and they give you some information, it might not fit anyway, so you're worse off. Remember, it's not finding the answer for them. It's finding the hug. It's finding the social support. That's what we have. Not listening to know, but listening to understand. So guidance includes positive words, yes, because we need to move them to a point where they have that prefrontal cortex working. But also it does involve some feedback, and especially spiritual. So let's bring the Bible in. That's our foundation for us. And let's go back to it and say, what do we find here? Looking at Elijah and say, look what Elijah went through. You're not the only one. Most of the people, when they find out that they're not the only one, it's amazing the momentum they get, because other people have trudged that as well. So telling somebody to fix it is really not positive in most cases. And telling them what to do is not really positive in most cases because I don't think like you and I don't have the skills that you have right now to do that. So listening is the most important skill you have for encouragement. Listening to the needs of the individual and fitting those needs with a hug or a kind smile or supportive statement is the biggest, most powerful part of encouragement. So let's look at the Bible and see what's going on. Anybody remember this Joseph in Acts 4:36? By the way, there's only one time his name is mentioned like this. Do you know what his name is? We know him as? I didn't remember either. It's Barnabas. So from now on, his real name is gone. His nickname is now inserted in. Look at what his nickname is. The Son of Encouragement. Now, he was a Christian before Paul was. Paul had been converted on the road to Damascus. Paul now is coming in. And remember that the people that are Christians realized that Paul had been killing them and imprisoning them, so no one wanted to be with him. So who was the one that went and took Paul to Jerusalem so that the church in Jerusalem knew who this new Paul was? It was Barnabas. He went in, we see that in Acts 9, and said, you know me, look at me, and see this person next to me, and this is the Paul that is now different from Saul to Paul. You'll see he also, when the first missionary journey, remember his cousin was Mark. They took Mark, and Mark got homesick, and he left the journey. Paul was, like me, would be very upset about that situation. So the next time they have a missionary journey, Paul goes, don't bring Mark. And Barnabas said, let me bring Mark because I can show you he is changed. Paul said, no, don't bring Mark. So in essence, what happened is we didn't have that chance for redemption, but look at Barnabas. What did he do? He didn't confront Paul. He didn't say, you know, I've been a Christian longer than you have. I've been with you on this journey. He didn't say any of that. He said, okay, let me take Mark. We'll just do 2 missionary journeys instead of 1. We'll get double the space, and I'll show you that Mark will work. So we speed dial to Colossians. We find out that Paul now has brought in Mark and has a lot of respect for Mark. We see also in the 1 Timothy that he's with Paul in Rome. Barnabas allowed that to happen. Barnabas didn't give up. He said, let's see this. Let's work on that. Let's change this. And through Barnabas, the son of encouragement, Mark then became very close with Paul. The fourth of these is accomplishment. That is, making a goal and in that goal. So really, what's our end goal? It doesn't have a lot to do with this, except we do have life and have to live here, but our end goal is getting to heaven. And the end goal of me is to help you get to heaven if I can. And if I see a need, it's for me as a brother and sister, or brothers and sisters in Christ, to step up and say, how can I help you? But not with an answer, but with a hug, with a smile, with encouragement. That is what we need to have. That's our end goal. It's amazing. Have you ever been in a situation or seen somebody when they've been really down and all of a sudden find a way out and they come up and they can't stop telling people how to do it? How excited they are to change? It's amazing the momentum that can be generated from that deep, dark place once they find movement. So we'll go here to Solomon, and he has an interesting way of putting this, which I'm going to reference a little bit later. Proverbs 16:24, pleasant words are what? A honeycomb. Those of you eaten honeycomb recently, very, very tasty. So sweet. By the way, it's an antibiotic too, because bacteria doesn't live in it, which the Egyptians used in their surgeries. Sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. Why the bones? It's the deepest part of the body. It's the structure. Without the bones, we'd flop around like amoeba. It is the strength. It goes to the strength of the body. It goes to the stability of the body. That's what he's talking about here. Isaiah also mentioned a little bit in there about encouragement. He said, those who hope in the Lord. So you might say, wait a second, Jack. Hope and encouragement, a little different. Hang on to that thought, because I'm going to show you where hope and encouragement work together. Will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. There's no restrictions there. That is beauty, freedom. So God's word is full of encouragement. We're going to go through a lot of scriptures here in a little bit. I won't read all of them, but I will give them to you for your reading on home. So definitely pleasant words. Solomon was right. This book is built on pleasant words. So we have this term called paying it forward. Remember what that is? So when you have something that happens, you get excited, you give it to somebody else. This is what we do if we're excited about finding ways to get out of that dark space and finding our way spiritually toward God. So in the process of helping a brother or sister, that momentum they generate will then reap benefits because they're going to go out and help somebody else. I used to tell my students, we build a framework by one needle at a time. So if you look at a pine tree, it's not building the roots up first. You build from the very first pine needle way at the top. That's you. If you can help another pine needle get better, you build the tree from the top down. But it takes the first pine needle to teach the second pine needle to get there. Your responsibility is significant in helping other individuals. So how much more likely are they to reciprocate like we would if we came out of the dark place and was telling people about where we could go, how we could resolve issues? This is what we have in the Christianity and that brotherhood and that strength of the brotherhood. So let's look at a few scriptures and I'll call the lesson and it will be yours. We can see in John 13, 34 to 35 that encouragement allows us to love as deeply as Jesus loved. Now, obviously, I'm never going to love as deeply as he does, but it's a reference to getting there in the deeper understanding of love, that agape. Encouragement gives hope. Remember I told you that a few minutes ago? Here we go. Romans 15:4. For whatever was written in earlier times, that's Isaiah, that's Proverbs, things written in earlier times, for our instruction, so that perseverance and what? Encouragement of the scriptures, we might have what? Hope. We start seeing a connection between encouragement and hope. I see hope a little differently. Linda and I were talking about it, and she was saying which is stronger, is that faith or hope? Well, I think hope is kind of the end point of faith, but you may disagree with me on that. So encouragement helps us through times of discipline and testing. You can see that in Hebrews 12:5. We can see the encouragement adds to what those spiritual virtues are. Remember? Spiritual virtues of patience, kindness, love. Encouragement adds to that. So in a little bit of review, if we employ encouragement as we see it spiritually, we have the power within us as a bunch of needles to bring other needles closer to out of the mire and moving forward. That's the essence of what Paul has given us in his scriptures. Instead of short-term issues such as what am I doing here, why can't I do things, and why am I mired again in this issue, we can start seeing the big picture. To me, the big picture is God loved me enough that before he built this world, he put into place a way for my salvation. Before he did anything, that's what he did for me. Then he built this world that would sustain me, and then he built me, and what did he say? He saw it was good, not bad. He knew we were going to be sinful, but he saw we were good. He loved us enough to build us, put us here, and then what did he do? He gave us the Old Testament as a foundation, as a tutorial, to understand what was going to happen when Jesus came. That's why I have in Isaiah and Proverbs and others. Then guess what? He sent Jesus, and he came willingly. The big picture is Jesus came, gave up his life, died on the cross. That would have been it. That would have been bad. He had to rise from the grave, and then he became our mediator. That's the big picture for me. If we miss some of those parts along the way, we lose the big picture. And sometimes, being discouraged, we lose that big picture. He said, I come to give you life. You'll see that, and I give it to you abundantly. John 10:10. Not just marginal, not just survivable, but abundantly. The only way we can find that abundant life is to have individuals around that help us when we get stuck, pull us out, and give us that warm hug. Just a little bit of encouragement to find the momentum, get going. Hopefully today I've given you a little bit of information concerning gratitude and the need for gratitude, spiritual need for gratitude. Hopefully tonight I've given you a little bit more on encouragement and how encouragement is really important for us, and especially for us as brothers and sisters in Christ to get through this world that is so difficult to live in. If there's any need that you have at this time, that's what we have the time for. Please feel free to come forward if you need prayers or whatever that is. So the invitation is yours.